Ladies and gentlemen, this is internet personality Vangelus, and the guardian of the gates of the Cyber Geek Alliance is the third member of Unique Toys' Orden team, and his name is Fenrir, the twin-headed groin dog that takes us to the halfway point of UT's abominable combiner man journey. Fenrir is a twin-sinnering sinner of twins, so naturally he turns into a big yellow dog with some double-headed action going on. The main hue is nicely creamy, with some topical dark turquoise to support it, and the right kind of purple for Fenrir's matching twin tails. The paintwork picks out a lot of details in a vaguely G1 stickery kind of way. All the coloration stuff looks good. But while parts are sculpted well, such as the double dog heads and the paw claws, Fenrir's beast mode suffers from a similar elongation problem to Alberic's. There's an obvious and distracting robot pelvis that intensely looks like it's supposed to be sucked into the blocky mass of this mode's rear third, and I find it to be a massive aesthetic bummer as it makes Fenrir look real weak from non-3/4 viewing angles. There are peg holes on his back and shoulders to add the Orden Combiner foot mush, which is pretty much identical to Troll's in how it splits into 3 weapons and has hidden missile spam. Looks okay, I guess. And it does help attempt to cover up the messy midsection of this beast mode. Fenrir's rear doggy legs have got a joint here, and then a joint there, and a joint there, and a joint there, all in the same axis. So it's a pretty poseable leg in one axis. It's fine, I wasn't expecting much, but it does come off a little weak once you look at the front legs, which have similar joints except in 2 axes, because they're the robot mode arms. So there's a swivel here, an outward hinge here, a bicep, quote-unquote swivel, a double-jointed elbow here, then like a hinge here with a ball socket joint on the end that allows for some foot tilt, and thus, when you start posing him, you're able to get like this really good-looking front part of the dog mode, and this kind of boring-looking back part of the dog mode. Just, I don't know, make it look like it's running, or taking a leak, and he's fine. His tails are flexible plastic, so they can do this. You can shoot little scrunched-up balls of paper with them, I guess, and they can swivel in their connection point, if you want like one up and one down, you know, to hug things. He's got a joint here, which again, I guess facilitates peeing on things. I guess there are like, there is a hinge here, but it's for transformation. It involves dislodging his leg from this entire chunk of the dog mode. I don't really like doing that myself. Aesthetically, that's a bit much. There's also some joints here on the dog necks. Once again, like there's a ball joint and a hinge here, but using these for dog mode articulation, I don't really care much for, because then this whole thing is detaching. His throat is no longer connected to anything. I prefer to keep that set in there. Just use this for a little bit of left and right wiggle on either head. There are ball joints here and here. Pretty good range on both. Like, you know, you get all this kind of stuff going on. And as you can see, I've taken the middle segment on here and flipped it 180 degrees on this one just to change the curve of each neck. If you want, you can flip this back around and get these two heads to have identical curvatures. But I like the idea of one being kind of S-curved up a touch and the other one being curved down a little bit. Just feels a little bit more dynamic to me. And of course, as you can see, one mouth's open, one is closed. If you really want to, you can open both mouths. Look at that, hooray. We're doing science here. There's little sharp teeth inside. They probably hurt. Well, let's find out. Not really, actually. But as far as a dog mode goes, especially a double-headed one, Fenrir's got some good stuff going on. The rear legs, I kind of wish had some 2-axis mobility without detaching from his butt, but the front half is so good, you can kind of just hide the back half behind all his dogginess. The tails are removed and set aside before transformation. Parts forming weapon storage. The sky falls another inch. Legit, it's kind of a shame. Fenrir's robot legs use a double-jointed extension, similar to Alberic's, and instead of a predictable slider mechanism. The space opened up inside of his shins is then filled in with his curled rear dog leg packs, and I am way into this idea over having visible leg pod chunks in robot mode. The front dog legs transform into bipedal arms in an extremely textbook fashion, while the dog heads just flip back, a la the G1 toy. And what a bummer, in my opinion. More on that later. Fenrir's humanoid head unfolds from a chest flap setup, and his transformation is rather quickly completed. It's a kind of an underwhelming experience. And this is a kind of underwhelming robot mode. Once again, his colors and color placements are fine, very throwbacky with some liberties taken for the sake of keeping things interesting. Paint apps are clean and pick out enough stuff, but he's just a robot man. And a robot man with a slightly tiny head and slightly balloonish upper torso. He's just bland. I mean, his head sculpt is fine, it looks like a Transformers character, I guess. His body's kind of blocky, like a Scramble City Combiner limb, only larger, I guess. His twin dog heads are simply hanging down like a backpack, except that they don't lock in anywhere, so they're just straight up dangling. You can have them swing up like a pair of cannons or just a pair of dog heads coming out of his shoulders, but after the badass design of the Beast Hunter's version of Sinner Twin, also called Twin Strike, and the bestial engineering of Troll's violence hand options, I am super disappointed that there's no arm integration for these beast heads and necks whatsoever. His two tail pieces have nowhere to go except for into his hands as a pair of melee weapons. Looks fine! I wish there was a storage spot too. The Combiner foot weapons can peg all over Fenrir as well, but since he already has dual weaponry like Alberic, I'm with the demographic who'd prefer to just give all this stuff to Troll, to give him his own doubled up armaments and add to his overall badassitude. Fenrir's robot head is on an inoffensive ball joint with an inoffensive amount of wiggle in most all directions and an inoffensive amount of total 360 degree neck snappery. His shoulders are on big dedicated inoffensive swivel joints, with an outwards hinge that is somewhat limited. It goes about that far, and that's it. Unfortunately, the bicep swivel is not inoffensive. Here, it can... well, I thought it could. No, it can't. Here it can swivel. It's up there, you see. Once you start moving it, it gets completely stuck inside the shoulder pauldron, so you gotta swivel it first, then move it up. And if it's at an angle, then his shoulder only comes out that far. That's offensive. His double-jointed elbow is inoffensive. It does that. As for his wrists, they do this, or they twist, and that's about it. Highly inoffensive, as is his waist joint, which turns inoffensively. There's no ab joint, no torso crunch. I'm okay with that, would have liked it, but it's not a critical piece of jointery. His hips are kind of soft, buttery detents, and unfortunately, this is the extent of how far they can go forwards and backwards. They go back about that far. They go forward about that far. He can't really easily sit down. The outward motion, though, is borderline offensive in how inoffensive it is, because he can do straight up splits. And that's pretty good. His knees are simple friction hinges. They bend about that much. It's about how much I'd like knees to bend, so I feel okay. There's a thigh swivel right above the knee joint. His toes can wiggle if you're into that, but his ankles are just big blocks on hinges that almost separate from the rest of his legs to allow for an ankle tilt. Now, this is a great ankle tilt, because if you decide to get a little bit offensive with his splits ability, you can still have his feet right on the ground, so he's completely calm, steady, solid. I could put his hands on his hips, but first I have to bend his bicep when it's down here. There we go. Proper cocky Van Damme pose. Good job, Fenrir. Inoffensive to pose. Could have had maybe a little bit more range on his hips. Could have had a better implementation of a bicep swivel. But I'm alright with it. He does what he needs to, I guess. He just doesn't do anything really inspiring. Fenrir is the other leg of the Organ Combiner, and while he has some bits of dedicated engineering for his limb mode, he comes off feeling a little unfinished compared to his below-the-belt counterpart, Troll. Fenrir's beast heads just kinda hang out in the back of the shin, much like in robot mode, and while they can be made to look like part of the smooth silhouette, there isn't much to secure them in place. I feel like too much is being left up to me, similar to how Warbitron's airburst made me feel in his arm mode. Worst of all, there's nowhere to cleanly store Fenrir's tail weapons. Maybe there will be a solution once the whole combiner's put together, I don't know, but so far, standing him next to the arm and leg modes of Troll and Alberic, I'm only seeing a weak link in Fenrir's contribution. Back when I first got Troll, I figured that by the time half of the team had come out, I'd be on my third dose of unique and interesting design and engineering. Instead, I still have the very unique and interesting Troll, And then his two inoffensive yet uninspiring pals. I mean, at least Alberic contains a fantastic combiner elbow, but Fenrir, his leg mode feels phoned in, his robot mode looks generic, and his beast mode repeats Alberic's error in looking a little too stretched out. And there's no combiner engineering offering an easy excuse this time. It's not like any of his modes are bad to the point of flipping a table, and as a toy, he's built solidly and on par with his price point, but this is a toy that is far too aware of the fact that many of its buyers will leave it in leg mode for most of its life. And while that buyer market reality gives ample cover to many of Fenrir's more boring shortcomings, I find myself looking back at Troll and wondering how on earth these two toys came from the same project. Where Troll is exciting and fun as a standalone toy, Fenrir is an out-farted quota toy that just wants to be a leg so he can go back to sleep. This is not a toy to buy for any reason other than collecting the Orden 5. Like I said, he does at least work fine, but I really hope the remaining two releases take us even halfway closer to the amazing opening experience of Troll, because I do not want to be in the timeline where Troll is the odd duck of the set. Anyway, this has been Internet Personality Vangelus, and unless their winged arm man is a troll tier wow banger, I truly hope Unique Toys pulls some badass tricks with the leader of the group. This experience needs some magic again, man!